Hi, I'm Marjorie. At my father's birthday dinner, they raised their glasses and toasted the idea that the family dog deserved my seat more than I did. My mother called it the greatest gift I could ever give. So that night, while they were sleeping off champagne and self-righteous smiles, I sold the house they laughed in, froze the accounts they used to silence me, and disappeared. But I didn't vanish out of weakness. I vanished to become the echo they'll never outrun. Before we begin, where are you listening from? Morning? Midnight? Tell me in the comments. And let me ask you something. What would you do if your own family wished you never existed? I stood at the gates of the Vale Mansion, the place I helped design but never got credit for. The driveway gleamed under the California twilight, lined with imported roses and the kind of marble that needed polishing every other day. My reflection shimmered in the tall glass doors before I stepped through them, and for a moment I wondered if I should have stayed outside. Inside, laughter floated like expensive perfume, pretty, rehearsed, and hollow. The string quartet played a song I'd picked for my father's 60th birthday, 10 years ago. They'd never remembered that either. My mother, Evelyn, was already correcting a young waiter on how to angle the champagne bottle. Her diamond earrings sparkled like they were competing with her ego. I found my seat at the long dining table, right at the edge, half hidden by a floral centerpiece, taller than my confidence tonight. It was my father's 70th birthday. Richard Vale, a man who built his empire on precision, control, and selective affection. Next to him sat Clarissa, my older sister, wearing the kind of smile that photographs well. "Clarissa, dear," my father began, raising his glass. "For everything you've done to expand our family business, your vision continues to carry us forward." The guests clapped politely. I froze for half a second. Clarissa's vision was my design proposal, my late nights, my research. I'd written every line of that expansion plan. My hand twitched against my napkin, but I said nothing. Under my breath, I murmured, "It was my vision first." My mother turned sharply. "Don't mumble, dear. It's unattractive." Laughter rippled through the room like a current. I smiled faintly, the kind of smile you wear when your heart's bleeding, but you've run out of Band-Aids. As the meal went on, I tried to disappear into the background, a role I'd mastered long ago. The talk around me blurred into a familiar hum of privilege and self-congratulation. Then came the moment that sliced through the noise. My father lifted his glass again. "You know," he said, his voice rich with wine and pride, "it would be more meaningful to have Benny, the dog, sit in your place, Marjorie." My mother laughed too loud, too easily. "Oh, Richard, don't say that," she said, then leaned toward the guests. "Though, honestly, the best gift she could give us tonight is her silence." The table joined in with polite laughter. I didn't move. My hand rested around the stem of my wine glass, the coolness grounding me. "Silence," they said. My gift to them. I looked down at my untouched food, perfectly arranged, perfectly pointless. The air thickened, pressing against my ribs. After a while, I excused myself. No one stopped me. In the restroom, I stared at my reflection under the golden lights. My lipstick hadn't smudged. My eyes didn't even look wet. I whispered, "They finally said it out loud." For years, I'd felt it, that I was just filler in the family portrait. But hearing it spoken aloud turned the invisible into solid truth. And then the old memory came back, sharp and clear. I was 10, holding a blue ribbon from my school art competition. I'd signed my name in tiny letters at the corner of the painting. A week later, I found it hanging in our living room, my signature painted over, replaced by Clarissa's. My mother had said, "It's better this way, honey. She represents the family better." That night, something inside me quietly broke, and I learned how to swallow pride without choking on it. Back at the dinner, I could hear laughter from down the hall. My family, the people who taught me that silence keeps the peace. I walked back to the table. They didn't even notice I'd been gone. Clarissa was telling some story about her vision again. My father's glass was half full. My mother's eyes sparkled with approval. I sat down, placed my napkin neatly beside the plate, and looked at each of them. My voice didn't shake when I whispered, "If silence is what you want, I'll make it deafening." No one heard me. I pushed my chair back slowly, the sound drowned out by the string quartet. I stood up, smoothed my dress, and turned toward the door. No one called my name. The night air hit my skin as I stepped outside, cool and steady. Behind me, the mansion pulsed with music and laughter, all of it hollow, echoing inside a house that I no longer called home. I closed the door softly, hearing the latch click like a period at the end of a sentence that took 30 years to write. I took a deep breath, the first one that didn't feel borrowed, and whispered into the dark, "Let's see how they sound without me." That night, I didn't cry. I calculated. The cold click of the mansion door faded behind me as I walked to my car, heels tapping softly against the stone driveway. I didn't rush. I didn't cry. My hands were steady as I opened the door, slid into the driver's seat, and shut the world out. The laughter still echoed faintly through the grand windows. From this distance, it sounded like background noise from a show I didn't want to watch anymore. My phone buzzed in the console. I glanced down. A text. Evelyn, mother. "You embarrassed your sister. Stay away for a while." I stared at the screen, thumbs hovering. I could write back, "You embarrassed yourself." I typed it, then erased it. Instead, I whispered, "You'll get your wish." I placed the phone face down and pulled out of the driveway without checking my mirrors. There was nothing back there I needed to see again. The road home was quiet. Familiar streets looked different, sharper somehow. The stoplights blinked like little countdowns, urging me forward. By the time I parked in front of my house, the rage had cooled into something else, focus. Inside, the silence wrapped around me like a blanket. My home, minimalist, ordered, untouched by anyone's judgment but my own. No family portraits, no overstuffed chairs, just space, clean space. I walked straight to my office, turned on the desk lamp, and opened the laptop. The screen flickered to life, revealing folders meticulously labeled. Vale Holdings, Master Accounts Trust Fund, Distributions Property Titles, Hidden Ownership. I clicked through one by one, checking figures, verifying transfers. My hands moved with calm precision. They thought I was the silent one, the obedient one, the girl who stayed out of the spotlight because she couldn't handle it. The truth was simpler. I let them underestimate me. I let them think Clarissa built everything, while I built the bones beneath it. They used my name on nothing, but they signed everything with theirs. And I made sure I quietly owned it all. I initiated the transfers, account by account, into a separate entity I created 5 years ago, one they never knew existed. The interface asked for confirmation. I clicked yes, again and again. My phone rang. I didn't need to check who it was. I'd already queued the call. "Judith," I said when she answered, groggy and confused. "Marge, it's past midnight. What's going on?" "I need you to file immediate liquidation on everything under Monroe Trust LLC. Effective now. No notifications to cosigners." She went quiet. Then, "You're walking away?" I looked at the blinking cursor on my screen. "No, I'm cleaning house." "You sure you want to do this?" "I've been sure since I was 10. There was a pause. "All right, I'll start it now. You'll get the documents in the morning." I hung up and sat back. My eyes caught the corner of a sketch taped to the wall. An old architectural draft from college. I'd spent weeks perfecting it, only for my father to say, "Clarissa presents better. Let her take the lead. You'll understand someday why we need her in the spotlight." Tonight, that phrase echoed back in my mind. You'll understand someday. I finally did. At 1:47 a.m., I listed the Beverly Hills mansion for sale, the one my parents called our legacy. It was under my name, has been for years. They didn't notice. They never ask who signs the paperwork, just who gets to cut the ribbon. I opened the bank dashboard. One by one, I froze the accounts. Trust funds, property management, travel stipends, company expense cards. Every tab blinked, account restricted, access denied. Their world, the one they thought they controlled, began quietly closing in on itself. I watched the numbers still for a second, then stood up, walked to the window, and looked out over the dark city. No part of this felt like revenge. It felt like justice measured in quiet decimals. I opened my email, drafted one final message. To Evelyn Vale. Subject, you wanted space. I made it real. I hit send. The air felt different now, lighter. By the time I opened my eyes, the sun was already slicing through the linen curtains. My phone was vibrating nonstop on the nightstand, a low mechanical hum cutting through the stillness. I didn't rush to grab it. I stretched slowly, sat up, and stared at the Pacific through the window for a full minute before I picked it up. 13 missed calls, dozens of texts. I unlocked the screen. Vale Empire in crisis, assets frozen, legal ownership disputed. Revenge of the forgotten daughter? Insider claims betrayal from within. Family blindsided. My thumb scrolled while the coffee brewed. The headlines blurred, but the names didn't. Marjorie Vale, me. They had finally said it, just not the way I wanted. On the kitchen counter sat a chipped mug I liked. I poured the coffee slowly, inhaling the bitter steam. Outside, the waves came and went, like nothing had happened. I sat on the couch and opened my laptop. News anchors talked over each other on the live stream. Images of the Vale estate, the company headquarters, photos of me, younger, next to Clarissa, always 2 steps behind, always partially cropped. A live press conference began. Evelyn, polished in pearls and posture, sat between 2 advisors. Cameras clicked like insects. Her voice trembled, just enough to sound maternal. Our daughter is not well. We love her deeply and we ask for privacy while we help her heal. My jaw didn't clench. I didn't throw anything. Clarissa stepped forward, her voice clear and falsely compassionate. This wasn't her. She's been under pressure. We've tried to support her, but sometimes people spiral. We only want her to get the help she needs. They'd rehearsed it well. It wasn't just the lies, it was the familiarity of it, the way they turned my strength into instability. It had always been their weapon of choice. Years ago, when I tried to walk away from the family business, when I dared to say I needed space, Evelyn called a board meeting, told everyone I was suffering from stress-induced delusions, that I was exhausted from overwork. Then she hugged me in front of the staff and said I'd be taking a leave of absence. For her own good. It worked then. The board fell silent. I fell silent. And here they were again. Louder, richer, more polished. Spinning the same story with better lighting. I closed the tab and opened social media. Former classmates, colleagues, people I hadn't spoken to in years, all sharing the same narrative. Jealousy is ugly. She always seemed off. Poor Clarissa. How awful to be betrayed by your own blood. Richard's voice popped up in a recorded statement. We've always loved Marjorie. This is a family matter. She's going through something. My inbox was full of questions disguised as concern. Are you okay? What happened between you and Clarissa? Do you need help? I didn't answer. I didn't react. Instead, I opened the camera on my phone and hit record. No makeup, no filter, just me, lit by the morning light. I know what they're doing, I said, voice low. I've known for years what they'd do if I ever stopped playing along. They built their house on my silence. I won't break it for them, not yet. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then stopped the recording. I didn't upload it, I deleted it. Saved only the timestamp. 10:47 a.m. Maybe one day I'd want to remember the exact moment I let them win the morning battle, so I could time the moment I took the war. Back on the laptop, Evelyn was now hugging Clarissa as the camera zoomed in. I closed the screen. I stood up and walked to the sliding door, cracked it open, and let the salty breeze cut through the stale headlines still ringing in my head. They wanted a public game. Fine. I turned back toward the desk and whispered to no one, "You wanted to play in public? Let's see how you handle the truth." The file finished uploading at exactly 12:02 a.m. I didn't flinch. I didn't hesitate. I just sat there watching the green progress bar disappear into a blinking message. Your document has been successfully submitted. It was a PDF, just one. Nothing flashy, no headlines, no accusations. Just a clean title. Vail Holdings Original Architect Signatures, 1998-2019. Under every project name, beneath every high-rise and luxury plaza the family boasted about, one signature repeated, Marjorie L. Vail. I didn't add context. I didn't have to. I knew the industry would recognize the buildings immediately. They'd seen the ribbon cuttings, the plaques with Clarissa's name in gold. But they'd never seen this, my name, where it always should have been. Outside, rain started tapping the windows like a polite knock. I leaned back, letting the silence in the room stretch. A cup of tea had long gone cold on my desk. I didn't touch it. Some bitterness tastes better when left untouched. Notifications started to trickle in. A few comments, then dozens, then hundreds. Architects, engineers, former contractors. People who had once sat in the same conference rooms with me, barely remembering the woman in the corner taking notes. Now they were asking, was she the real designer? Why was she left off the credits? Who erased her name? I didn't answer. Instead, I clicked on another window, one labeled Phase 2. But before I could open it, my phone lit up. Judith. I answered on the first ring. You saw it. There was a pause on the other end, then her voice, groggy but sharp. Marjorie, what did you just do? I glanced at the screen. Correction. You realize this isn't just about the family anymore. You're setting fire to the entire board of directors. These buildings were mine, I cut in quietly. She sighed. You're shaking the ground they've all stood on for decades. Then maybe they should have built on something real, I said. Another pause. You're not doing this for revenge? I shook my head, though she couldn't see me. No, I'm doing it because I'm tired of living like a ghost. Judith didn't argue. She just whispered, You always deserved the credit. I didn't reply. We both knew that truth didn't need repeating. Over at the Vail Mansion, the news had already hit. Evelyn's hand trembled as she stared at her tablet. Clarissa's glossy photo, taken just months ago at a gala, was now sitting under a headline that read, Award-winning designs actually credited to sister. Richard stood behind her, jaw clenched. It's her, he muttered. She's out for blood. Clarissa was pacing the living room, voice sharp and high-pitched. Call your attorneys. Get this taken down. This is libel. Evelyn's voice dropped to a whisper. We can't fix what's documented. The words didn't land softly. For once, there was no spin to offer, no excuse to dress in pearls. The world was seeing the bones beneath the diamonds, and the bones were mine. Back in Malibu, I clicked through a folder of voicemails I'd archived years ago. I shouldn't have kept them, but sometimes you hold on to the things that hurt because they're the only proof the pain was real. One stood out. My father's voice. "We built this name together, Marjorie. You and I, behind the scenes." I pressed play again, listening to the way he said "we," like I'd been a silent investor in my own life. I whispered into the quiet, "No, I built it alone." There was pride in that, but it came with a weight, the kind of ache that sits under your ribs. I had no one left to explain it to, no one left to deny it, just the facts, finally out in the open. As the sky outside softened into a deep navy blue, the notifications shifted. Some came from journalists. One message stood out. "If you're the real architect, tell your story." I hovered over the reply box. My fingers typed, "Not yet." I stared at it, then deleted it. Not because I wasn't ready, because they weren't. Instead, I opened a folder labeled Phase 2, the Trust Fund. Inside, documents outlined years of financial sleight of hand, all done legally, all done quietly. They thought they owned the properties. They didn't. They thought I'd always play nice. I wouldn't. I glanced at the clock. 2:11 a.m. The rain had picked up now, a steadier rhythm tapping against the glass. The kind of night that wraps around you like a cold sheet. I exhaled, slow and steady. "You took my name off the blueprints," I murmured. "Let's see how you survive without it on the accounts." The morning sun poured through the windows like it didn't know what I'd done. Golden light spilled across my desk, kissing the edge of my laptop screen, illuminating rows of digital documents, spreadsheets, and signed confirmations. The ocean outside was serene, stretching endlessly beyond the glass, while inside I sat in quiet, methodical destruction. This wasn't rage, it was resolve. I hovered over the final set of forms. Transfer of property, transfer of funds. Not to Evelyn, not to Clarissa, not to the company bearing my last name. Instead, the deeds were being signed over to charities, scholarship programs, and employees who had once begged for raises only to be told, "There's no room in the budget." There had always been room, just never for people like them. Or me. I clicked Submit. Judith called as I was watching the confirmation blink across the screen. "You're really doing this?" she asked, no greeting. "It's done," I said. Her silence stretched before she finally spoke. "You know this is irreversible. Once you walk away—" "I'm not walking away," I said. "I'm locking the door behind me." "Marjorie." "They wanted me gone," I continued, my voice steady. "So now I'm removing myself from everything, and removing them from everything I ever gave." She sighed into the phone, quiet but heavy. "You just cut them off from millions." "No," I said. "I cut them off from me." There was a time, not so long ago, I would have hesitated, but hesitation had cost me too much. At 25, I'd unwrapped a birthday gift from my father, beautifully framed stock certificates. "Your shares," he said, beaming like it was love. Later, I'd learn he had signed Clarissa as the controlling party. "You don't need to worry about business," he told me that night over cake. Kindness in my family was always a bribe with strings so fine you didn't notice them until you were strangled. That was the day I realized my name meant nothing unless they could use it. Now it meant something because they couldn't. Back in Beverly Hills, their world had started cracking. Clarissa, always the image of grace, was yelling at a financial advisor on speakerphone. "My card just declined. Do you understand what that means? Fix it. Now." Evelyn was pacing the marble floors in silk and fury. "She can't legally freeze our assets. This is illegal." The family attorney's voice was small. "Mrs. Vale, the trusts. They were all registered under Marjorie's name. She had full authority." "What?" Evelyn barked. "She was a silent partner." Silent doesn't mean powerless, the lawyer replied. Richard, seated by the fireplace with clenched fists, muttered, "That girl destroyed everything." Evelyn didn't even look up. She was never part of this family. She said it with the same venom she once used to scold me for not smiling enough in family photos. Now, there would be no more photos, no more staged celebrations, no more illusions. I walked outside, barefoot on the sand, letting the ocean wash over my feet. The tide had smoothed away every footprint, every trace of who had walked here before. I watched the horizon and thought, for so long, all I wanted was to be seen. Now, all I want is to never see them again. I returned inside, opened my browser, and deleted every social account I had. No more tags, no more photos, no more digital doors left unlocked. That night, I closed my laptop. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. The message read, "You think it's over? You stole from us. You'll pay." I stared at it for a moment, then locked the screen. They still didn't get it. I hadn't stolen anything. I reclaimed what was mine. I sat there in silence, rain starting to tap again against the windows like a familiar rhythm, the kind that comes before a storm. I whispered to myself, if they want a war, I'll end it quietly. 2 weeks later, I walked up the courthouse steps into a storm of cameras. Flashbulbs fired like artillery, catching every angle, every blink. Reporters shouted questions, their voices stacking over one another, a wall of noise I didn't bother scaling. I kept my head level and my pace steady. My black suit matched the tone of the day, clear, unshakable, and built for defense. Across the crowd, I saw them. Evelyn, Clarissa, and Richard, flanked by their lawyers, stylists, and carefully selected scarves. They wore coordinated grays, like a mourning family on a magazine cover. Evelyn clutched Clarissa's hand as if the courtroom were a funeral and I had killed someone. Judith fell in step beside me, carrying a leather folio of receipts and truths. "They filed for emotional damages and financial misconduct," she said without looking up. "You ready?" I gave a soft nod. "Let's begin." Inside, the air was dry and heavy with performance. Reporters lined the back, pretending not to record. The judge entered and we rose. He had a presence that cut through pretense, but I'd learned long ago. Justice doesn't always need noise, just wait. Evelyn testified first. Her voice cracked just enough. We tried everything to help her, but she turned on her own blood. She squeezed Clarissa's hand again for effect, her eyes glistening. I didn't flinch. Not even when Judith slipped me the first folder. Images of fake emails, doctored documents, financial transfers Clarissa had authorized in my name. "Let them finish lying," I whispered to Judith. "Then I'll speak." Clarissa took the stand next. The courtroom leaned in. She always had the spotlight presence, polished and glowing, but under pressure, polish cracks. "She was jealous," she snapped, gesturing to me. "Dad trusted me with everything. That's why I was given power of attorney." Judith didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply held up a single page. "Including this one, the authorization document you forged 3 years ago." The air shifted. Murmurs stirred like dry leaves. Clarissa's face went pale. "What is that?" Evelyn hissed from her seat. Judith turned to the judge. "We've confirmed it through an independent forensic handwriting analyst. It's not Marjorie's signature." The judge leaned forward, reviewing the page with furrowed brows. Clarissa remained frozen. The perfect daughter unraveling on public record. Then it was Richard's turn. He stood like a man accustomed to commanding boardrooms. "I built this empire," he thundered. I rose slowly. "Then why are all the asset titles in my name?" The silence in the courtroom wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. the kind that cuts through legacy and ego all at once. The judge scanned the documents, flipping through title after title. It appears Ms. Vale is indeed the legal owner of the holdings in question. Evelyn's posture collapsed, and so, inch. Richard sat back hard, his jaw clenched tight. Clarissa stared at her hands like they weren't hers. When it was my turn, I didn't need theatrics. I stood at the center of the room and let my voice carry without shouting. My family once told me that disappearing would be the best gift I could give them. So I did. I vanished. I pulled myself out of every room, every deal, every photograph. But what they didn't count on was this. Disappearing doesn't mean disappearing quietly, because silence has weight, and eventually it demands consequences. No rebuttal came, no cross-examination, just the judge's gavel marking a pause in the storm. Outside, the cameras were waiting again. The courthouse steps hadn't changed, but the people walking them had. As I turned to leave, Evelyn intercepted me in the hallway. Her smile was thin as wire. "You think you've won?" she whispered. "You have no idea what's coming." I met her eyes. They were the same shade I used to see in the mirror as a girl. But now, all I saw was someone losing control of a script she thought she wrote. I didn't reply. Some threats don't deserve responses. But silence, I've learned, can sometimes invite something far more dangerous. It was late when I left Judith's office that night. The Pacific Coast Highway was nearly empty. A ribbon of asphalt coiled along the cliffs, the moon hanging over the ocean like a cold coin. My headlights sliced through fog, catching glimmers of salt mist that clung to the glass. I was tired, but not careless. After weeks of courtroom tension, I wanted quiet, the kind that didn't talk back. Judith had asked me to stay for one more coffee. "You shouldn't drive this late," she warned. "You've made powerful people desperate." "I've made dishonest people uncomfortable," I'd said. "That's not the same thing." I wish I'd listened. The first curve came easy, the second too, but as I pressed the brake to slow before the third, nothing. The pedal sank to the floor, soft, useless. At first, I thought it was panic, some mechanical illusion born of exhaustion. But the car didn't respond. It just kept accelerating, engine humming low like it knew something I didn't. The road curved sharply to the right. Below, the ocean churned, black, endless, waiting. I gripped the wheel, jerked hard, and aimed for the guardrail. The sound, steel against steel, was thunderous. Airbags exploded, the world turned white, and then silence. For a moment, I couldn't tell if I was alive. The ocean below was whispering, the way it does when it wants to pull you in. My hands shook as I tried the door. It jammed once, twice, before it gave way. I stumbled out, dazed, barefoot on the shoulder, headlights still burning behind me. When the sirens came, I remember thinking how strange it was that even rescue sounded like accusation. Hours later, I woke under fluorescent lights, my right arm wrapped in bandages. The steady beep of the monitor kept me tethered to the present. Judith sat beside the bed, eyes red, her phone clutched tight. "You're lucky," she said softly. "The guardrail held." I tried to sit up. "What happened?" Her expression hardened. "Someone cut your brake line." I stared at her, the words landing one by one. "That's not possible." "The police confirmed it," she said. "Clean slice. Professional." Deputy Harris stepped into the room, hat in hand. "Miss Vale, we're opening an investigation. No suspects yet, but—" He hesitated. "You got anyone who'd want to hurt you?" I let out a small laugh, the kind that doesn't sound like humor. "That list's been growing lately." He nodded, uncomfortable. "We'll keep you updated." After he left, Judith's anger filled the silence. "You know who did this, don't you?" I looked at her, my voice steady but low. I already know who. Evelyn's whisper replayed in my head. You think you've won? You have no idea what's coming. It echoed like a lullaby twisted out of love and turned into warning. For the first time since that courtroom, I felt something deeper than fury. It was disbelief. That blood could plan your funeral while your pulse was still strong. Lying in that hospital bed, I stared at the IV drip, the slow rise and fall of the clear fluid. I thought about what it meant. To survive something meant to erase you. They would rather see me dead, I whispered to myself, than see me free. Judith didn't argue. She just placed a file on my lap. You need to see this. Inside was a document, unsigned but official looking, an insurance policy filed under my name. I skimmed the details, my breath catching when I reached the end. Beneficiary, Clarissa Vale. Judith's voice trembled. This was recovered from the family's shared drive. It was never submitted, but it's real. I could barely feel my hands. They planned it, I said quietly. They actually planned it. Judith nodded, her expression torn between rage and pity. What are you going to do? I looked toward the window. Beyond the glass, dawn was just beginning to blush along the horizon. The sea was calm again, pretending nothing had happened. I'm going to give them what they want, I said, my voice calm now. They wanted me gone. Judith frowned. Marjorie, don't. I cut her off. I'll give them a ghost they'll never forget. And before the first light of dawn touched the windowsill, I was gone. At exactly 4:17 a.m., I stepped out of the hospital through the side entrance. I wore a hoodie Judith left for me, a surgical mask, and a pair of scrubs I borrowed from the nurse's cart. No cameras followed, no nurse called my name, no alarms went off. The overnight security nodded as I passed, probably assuming I was a shift worker finishing up early. By the time the sun rose over Los Angeles, I was no longer a patient. I was a headline. Marjorie Vale vanishes again. Mental breakdown or strategic silence. Whistleblower architect missing after court victory. Disgraced heiress evaporates into thin air. Every version of the story was carefully curated by the media, but none of them were mine, and that was exactly the way I needed it. In a dusty, forgotten studio loft downtown, a place once used as a set for a forgotten soap opera, I plugged in my laptop and connected to a secured line Judith had arranged. She'd deleted every trace that connected us over the last 48 hours. Even my Uber drop-off from the courthouse 2 nights ago had been wiped. This is a one-way street now, she'd said. You sure? I hadn't answered. Now, with the blinds drawn and the silence as thick as concrete, I sat down and began what I called the ghost plan. Not to disappear, but to haunt. One by one, I uploaded the files, encrypted videos, audio recordings, folders of emails, transaction trails, architectural blueprints with metadata, every piece of truth they'd buried, every stolen credit, every forged signature, every false award Clarissa had accepted on my behalf. The files were scheduled to auto-release to 10 major media outlets if my digital activity dropped for more than 72 hours. If they want me erased, I muttered, typing the last line of the script, I'll make sure the echo stays. Back in Beverly Hills, the mansion buzzed like a hornet's nest cracked open. Judith texted me updates without names, just codes. E is panicking, C's yelling, R is silent. I watched from my laptop, a live stream of the Vale Gate swarmed by reporters. Evelyn, perfectly dressed in a cream blouse, stood on the porch like she'd lost a child instead of orchestrating a murder. You have to fix this, she barked at Clarissa inside. Do something. Clarissa's voice carried through the glass. She's not gone, Mom. She's watching. I can feel it. And she was right. I was watching. Every press conference, every trembling interview, every legal statement. I sat quietly behind the screen, sipping tea from a wine glass they once mocked me for never using. Flashback, I was 23, sitting at the dinner table while they toasted Clarissa's promotion. Evelyn handed me a glass of Pinot and said, "Try to smile for once, dear. You don't want to look bitter in pictures." I didn't drink it then. Now I poured it myself, not to celebrate, to close the loop. "To silence," I whispered, raising the glass. The only thing they ever wanted from me. The glass stood next to my keyboard, like a totem. A memory of when I was quiet for survival, now quiet for control. The final upload was the one I'd saved for last. It wasn't flashy, just a spreadsheet. It listed over 20 shell companies, each tied to fraudulent real estate acquisitions, each signed off by Evelyn or Clarissa, but legally linked to me. It was the knife they'd sharpened for years. I turned the blade around. At exactly 11:01 a.m., the files dropped. It didn't take long. Veil Exposed trended in under an hour. News anchors read aloud the findings in real time, tax records, offshore accounts, blueprints with metadata, showing edits. Evelyn collapsed during a live interview. Clarissa shoved a reporter's mic and disappeared into the car. Richard, ever the silent patriarch, resigned from 3 boards within minutes. Judith's message came in, "You did it." I typed slowly. No, I ended it. There was no gloating, no music swell, just the long exhale of a war that cost me more than they'd ever know. I closed the laptop, leaned back against the chair, and stared at the ceiling. For the first time, it was truly quiet. I wasn't fighting, I wasn't running, I wasn't proving, I was ending. I stood, walked to the window, cracked it open just enough to feel the morning breeze against my face. Then, turning back to the dark room, I whispered to no one in particular, "Now I can finally disappear. For real this time." 6 months later, I did. Not in some dramatic, newsworthy way. No final post, no note, no traceable ticket to Europe. I simply stopped existing as Marjorie Vale. The name I carried like a curse is now just another line buried in old court transcripts and scandal headlines no one talks about anymore. Here in this quiet Oregon town with misty docks and driftwood fences, I'm Mara Lynn, a name no one questions because no one really asks. People here are polite, but distant. The kind of distant I needed. Every morning I walk to the cafe 2 blocks down. The owner, Rick, always greets me with the same line. "Coffee's hot, weather's cold, same as yesterday?" I nod, smile, sometimes add a "thanks." He doesn't push for more. That's what I like about him. This morning, though, something caught my eye. A folded newspaper sat at the end of the counter, just within reach. The headline wasn't big, not the kind that screams, but it was enough. Vale family under federal investigation, Clarissa reported missing. My eyes hovered on the words for a beat too long. I didn't pick it up, didn't ask for details, just left my cash on the counter and walked out with my coffee. On the way back, I let the salt in the air settle into my chest. The ocean isn't far, just a few blocks west. I don't always go, but this morning it called to me. They're still chasing shadows, I thought, sipping. But I'm not one of them anymore. That afternoon, a small envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Just my new name handwritten in Judith's familiar blocky script. Inside was a letter and one glossy photo. She wrote, "They think you're dead. Maybe that's the piece you needed. The house is gone, auctioned. The press doesn't even bother calling anymore. You won, Marjorie, even if they never said it." The photo showed the old Vale mansion. Boarded windows, overgrown lawn, the fountain dry and cracked. I stared at it for a long time. It looked smaller. I whispered the thought aloud, surprised by the ache in my throat. That house used to feel enormous, like a giant I couldn't climb over. Now it looked like a shell, hollow. Later that evening, I reached into the back of my cabinet and pulled out the only item I brought from my past life, the wine glass. The same one from that night at the family dinner, the one I never drank from. I poured just enough to fill it halfway, walked out to the porch and let the breeze hit my face. "To the girl who stayed quiet too long," I said, raising the glass. This time I drank, not to forget, to remember, on my terms. The ocean wind rose, rustling the tall grass near the steps. It felt like applause. People ask me in passing where I'm from. I usually just say, California, and change the subject. No one's pushed. I overheard Rick once telling a new customer, "Mara, sweet gal, keeps to herself. Lot of folks do around here." I smiled, too, myself. That's the closest thing to a eulogy I'll ever need. As I sat on the porch, the sun sliding behind the sea, music drifted from the cafe down the road. I froze. It was the same tune that played at my father's birthday, the night they toasted Clarissa and forgot I was even in the room. Only this time it didn't sting. This time I smiled. "You gave me silence," I said softly. "I turned it into power." Then I stood, walked barefoot across the cool sand toward the shore. I held the wine glass for a moment, the sunset catching its curve. It shimmered. One final breath, one last glance, and I threw it. The glass arced into the air and disappeared into the waves. No smash, no echo. Just silence. They say Evelyn lives alone now in some high-end retirement home outside San Diego. She doesn't get visitors. Her name opens no doors anymore. Clarissa, from what Judith hinted, sold her story to some overseas tabloid, hoping to paint herself as the misunderstood daughter. It didn't stick. She vanished not long after. No one's seen her since. Richard, well, he died 3 months ago. Quietly. His obituary made no mention of me. Not a word. Not even a "survived by." Even in death, he tried to erase me. But here's the thing I learned out here. When you stop needing to be seen, you start seeing everything clearly. I don't wake up angry anymore. I don't replay old conversations. I don't need to prove I was wronged, because I was, and I survived it. Disappearing wasn't punishment, it was freedom. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for those who tried to destroy you is to let them live with the echo of what they've lost. I didn't vanish to escape them. I vanished to find myself. And I finally did.